Understanding emotional triggers. All right. This is going to lead into a tremendous amount of exercises and journal prompts. So, exercise 18, exploring emotional triggers and mapping them to unhealed wounds. And then we're going to talk a lot about wounds, right? Worthlessness, abandonment, betrayal, guilt and shame, anger, fear. And there are journal prompts for each one of those. Journal prompts 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So, that is a lot. But it is, you will understand why we're doing all that. Now, I do want to talk about triggers with you guys for a minute because I think a lot of people use the word trigger as a pejorative, and it's led us to this real kind of visceral denial that we're ever triggered. And I think that's silly. I really do. I think triggers are a beautiful tool if we learn how to use them. And I am the type who leans into them because you don't know what you don't know. Your self awareness can only take you so far. I can only take you so far in this work, right? There's going to come a point where you're out in the wild and you're going to be triggered by things. And that is how you will know the healing that you still need to do. Someone asked me the other day, how do you know that you're healed from your trauma? And I said, not so eloquently, essentially, when that trauma is no longer at the center of your decision making, when you don't no longer consider that trauma in your decision making. But the other way is when you're no longer triggered by it, right? And that isn't the same as feeling emotions because someone reminds you of something that you also dealt with, like maybe I lost a child and you've lost a child recently and I'm sharing space with you and that those feelings come back up. Nah, I don't think that's being triggered. You'll know that you're being triggered when you get defensive, when you feel a need to like defend your position. Why do you feel the need to defend? Because you have hidden something from yourself that you don't want to see. And now, if you acknowledge what's happening in front of you with any integrity, you would also have to acknowledge what you refuse to see. So instead, I want to get away from that stimuli that is triggering me, that's challenging my point of view. Yesterday I had a conversation with someone and it really helped me understand the ego, just talking to her about it. But I want you to think of the ego as this bodyguard. It is your internal safety. It is the thing that sees you as an individual and needs to protect you as an individual. So if it has very limited perspectives, for example, right, it is going to cling to that perspective because it feels safe in that perspective. Your mind wants to validate its assumptions, right? That's how it can forecast how safe it will be out in the world. So now you're giving me information that challenges my perspective, one, or that hits a pre existing wound that I was trying to protect. Either way, you have made me feel vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, I feel unsafe. And I will defend that position and I will seek to get you as far away from poking into my wounds as possible. I become very defensive, right? So I want you guys to understand what that pathology is, not so that you can lean into it, but so that you can have power over it, right? Understand. So triggers are normally the things that either highlight the weakness in my perspective, right? Or they hit that wound directly. Again, both of which are going to make me feel very vulnerable. I feel vulnerable there because I am not strong there. I feel vulnerable there because there is something that needs to be healed. There's something that needs to be addressed that I have either forgotten about or that I refuse to look at. And now you're forcing me to look at it. You're holding up that mirror. You're shining that flashlight on my dysfunction, on my pain. I don't want to see it. I want to get away from that stimuli. Like I said, though, I lean into it. So if I am triggered, I will sit with that with integrity. But again, I'm also pretty emotionally mature. I will sit down with that. What's going on, girl? Why are you feeling this way? Right? What's going on? So I have a good example. I was dating this guy one time, barely dating. We were talking. I didn't like him. He was too emotionally needy. I tried to end things. He didn't want to end things. And then the next day, he ended things. Right. And I didn't want to be with this person, wasn't attracted to him, da 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 da. But just the mere fact that he rejected me Even if I had rejected him first, it didn't matter. I was triggered. And I started having a panic attack. I started spiraling. My ability to emotionally regulate was gone because that's what triggers normally do, right? I'm struggling. And I will talk to myself to understand myself. And I did. I was like, Nat, what's up? And I'm like, he rejected me. And I'm like, first of all, you didn't even want him. But even if he did reject you, and I'm literally having this conversation with myself, even if he did reject you, what does that mean? Taking right back to value statements, right? And I said, it doesn't mean anything. It just means this one person doesn't like me. And the second that I articulated that, I felt everything snap into place. I was able to regulate quite easily because it was a wound of worthlessness that he had touched that triggered that reaction. And I just needed to understand what it was. And then I understood I needed to do the deeper work around issues of worthlessness so that that wasn't an issue anymore. What does it mean? Right? What does it mean? So, in this way, I'm demonstrating a few things, right? I'm demonstrating emotional maturity, the ability to emotionally regulate, and how triggers can be used to help refine that internal guidance system that lives in all of us, right? That for most of us is completely out of whack, but doesn't have to be, all right? Most of us have wounds that have never been addressed, okay? So, what happens if you have a physical wound and it's just like not covered, not bandaged, not dressed, right? Any little bit of dirt that gets in there is going to hurt it. And if it's a long festering wound, the smallest little piece of dirt can cause a widespread infection. So it's not even the dirt that's the issue. It's not, right? It's my ability to regulate that dirt. It's my ability to protect my wound from becoming infected further. Same is true of internal wounds. If I have a bunch of festering internal wounds, then it will not take much at all to get a reaction out of me or to hurt me. I'm very sensitive to that stuff. And I don't mean sensitive like an empath. I mean sensitive as in I have a very low tolerance for any frustration, for any negative stimuli, right? Whereas if I don't have those wounds, I can endure a lot more of that without internalizing it as meaning anything to me, right? So we need to get in touch with those wounds and we need to understand our wounds because it is our wounds that really are the result of trauma, and our belief, our negative beliefs, our negative self-talk are a direct reflection of the wounds that still exist in me. So at, at first when he rejected me, I'm thinking everyone leaves, I'll never be chosen, I'm not worthy of love, nobody wants me. All these very negative things around worthlessness came up. So then I need to go back to my trauma inventory and I need to check in with the first instance of that worthlessness that was embedded in me. I need to get to the roots of that trauma, right? I need to address that wound at the level that I received it. And I need to keep dressing it and repacking it and keep readdressing it until it is healed. Sometimes it might take one bandage, sometimes it might take a year's worth. It really just depends on how deep that wound is. I need to keep affirming to myself that I do have value, that I am worthwhile, that I am deserving of love, and I will find it within myself or within others, however I choose to affirm myself. So I hope that you understand kind of the interplay between all of this and how through the understanding and integration of this all, I can really become this self actualized, really in control in a gentle way person who is living my best life, who really has control over her emotions, who really is not sensitive to the whims of the outside world, who really does live in integrity with themselves, with conviction. And there is power there. There is your personal power. There is the strength to manifest the life that you want. So these exercises dealing with your wounds, it's not light work. This might take you a couple of weeks before you watch another video, and that's okay. I want you to go through all the wounds. I want you to look at them in the context of your trauma inventory, and I want you to start addressing some of that trauma in a real way. Right? Once we clear some of this, then we can start building back up. And that's where we want to get to, building yourself in your image.